All right, welcome to the first Red Channel's official 2024 presidential election prediction with our Italian American correspondent, Jersey Mike. Recently, the debate between Biden and Trump has drastically injured Biden's chances of winning. Models are beginning to break down, but based on polling data, Jersey Mike and I will be assessing the damage. Jersey Mike, what's your opinion?
Well, the debate has drastically diminished Biden's position in this presidential race.
Okay.
As we will go over, he is behind in all of the traditional swing states and may be losing some lean Democrat states along with them.
Okay. Is he losing every major demographic group?
He is still winning black Americans, although his margins there are diminished. Trump is getting close to 20% of the black vote at this moment, which would, if that's true, that would put states like Georgia, Florida, and any other somewhat competitive states in the Sun Belt out of reach.
Well, I'm saying
He's
if he's winning about 20% of black Americans, then doesn't that spell doom for the Democrats? Isn't that like enough to win?
Yes, it is because that would throw Georgia out of reach for them.
Okay.
Georgia would be at least lean or likely red at that point. But when it comes to other demographics, it gets worse for him
Oh,
because he's basically even with Trump among Hispanics right now. Biden won 65% of Hispanics back in 2020.
okay.
Now he's about even with Trump.
So he's 50-50
Hispanics,
on Hispanics.
yeah, Hispanics are the second largest racial group in the country. And
Okay.
given the fact that they were a key part of the former Obama coalition, the fact that Trump is made inroads there is going to spell doom for him in states like Arizona, Nevada, and even shift other states, New Mexico and Colorado, closer to Trump than they would be more comfortable with, if that makes sense.
That sounds very promising. How is Trump doing with white women?
Well, among white women, his numbers have gone up since 2020. He's basically among about even with them with Biden. He's not well, he's slightly above even. He's winning them by about 4 or 5 points right now,
Okay.
which
Okay.
is still standard from what we would expect from that demographic. However, if you take a look at women as a whole, Biden's numbers among women has diminished. Well, this is considering all women, along not just white women, but with other races as well. Biden is only up 11 or 12 points among women, while Trump is up possibly above 20 with all men.
Wow. Okay. Okay. Starting in the Northeast, let's talk about your predictions for each state. So, beginning with Maine, what are you expecting?
All right, I'm going to start off with the first district, if that's okay.
Okay.
So, in Maine's first district, I believe that it will shift to the right, but it will not shift enough to make it like super competitive. But it's also not going to be completely safe for Biden either. I believe Maine's first district will go to Biden by a margin of 14 points.
Okay.
It's just on the cusp of being safe, but not completely there, if that makes sense.
How about the second district in Maine?
Maine's second district will go Republican by the same margin, 14 points, so likely Republican.
Pretty standard for the
Now,
second district.
this is where things get very interesting because now we have to talk about the margin at large. According to my model, Trump is ahead by 0.09 percentage points statewide.
Okay.
Both districts are about even. Because the districts are split 50-50, and there are still parts of the first district that are technically considered rural under the US Census Bureau, I am going to say the entire state vote will be tilt Trump by the smallest margin possible.
Before the whole debacle with Biden and him absolutely crapping the bed with the debate, I would have said that this prediction was too optimistic. Although it really does seem as though Democrats are utterly demoralized. I'm not the guy who would count his eggs before they're hatched, but it truly does seem as though Democrats are feeling defeated.
I would agree, and we're going to
Uh,
see that in a lot of other states coming forward.
okay, how are you feeling about New Hampshire?
Sure, I think is going to shift to the right from 2020, but I do not think Trump is going to win it. I feel like there are too many transplants from Boston that are now living in southern New Hampshire to make it winnable.
Well, like in
So I
Nashua.
have Biden, yeah, Nashua and Manchester, and on the coast as well. So I have New Hampshire going to Biden by 2 percentage points.
So that'd be light blue.
Yes, not the lightest. Yeah, I'll tell. Yes, the light blue. So it's going to be competitive, but I just don't see we're going to make up the margins there just because New Hampshire has got a lot of Massachusetts transplants since 2000 when it last voted Republican.
I agree. I agree. Um, and New Hampshire's never been a reliable state. There are tons of libertarians there, and you know how gamey they can be. You know how unreliable they can be.
Yeah, like these people will vote Democrat on the national level, but vote Republican on the state level just to keep their low taxes.
Yeah, exactly. I don't like New Hampshire as a state. Anyway,
Mm,
on to Vermont. How are you feeling Vermont will go? That'll obviously be bluer than New Hampshire, but how by how much in your estimation?
I believe Vermont is still going to be solidly blue, but I would like to point out it's going to shift to the right from 2020. So in 2020, Biden won Vermont by 36 points.
Okay.
In 2024, I think he'll win it between 28 points to 30 points.
Okay.
I want to add this in. Even Vermont is one of the first states that is going to be called on election night. Even though it is solidly blue, there are still things we can look for in Vermont to see how the nation is going to vote as a whole. For an example, in 2016 and 2020, Trump only won Essex County, Vermont, which is in northeast Vermont, and both elections were very competitive nationwide. However, I personally believe Trump will win at least one or two other counties from 2020.
Hmm.
And if that's the case, I strongly believe that is going to be a good indicator that rural whites might be shifting further to the right.
Who wouldn't under this climate, honestly? It seems
So
that every
Vermont is
demographic group is shifted right. Even if they're not won over 100%, obviously, like say black Americans or women generally,
mhm,
everyone's still shifted right.
mhm, I would agree. So I think Vermont, even though it's still going to be solid Dem on the list, I still think it's going to be like a 6 to 7 point shift to the right.
Okay. I mean, we can move on to Massachusetts. I assume that's just going to be still solid Dem. Um,
Solid blue, but just like Vermont, instead of being D plus 30, I see it as being between D plus 24 to 26.
okay. Okay.
Massachusetts does have the Cape in Bristol County in southeastern Mass that has a lot of working class voters,
Yep.
and they tend to be slightly more conservative than the rest of the state. So I see Trump making gains in southeastern Mass, and maybe even Western Mass as well. He might be able to pull off some extra votes from the Springfield and the Worcester area.
Yeah, I've heard
But
there are large conservative populations in I think kind of Braintree, but then also Saugus and Worcester.
yep, it's still going to be a solid margin for Biden, but not as solid as it was 4 years ago.
Okay. Um, how are you feeling about Rhode Island? Solid blue?
For Rhode Island, I'm honestly going to say I'll say solid blue right now, but it's on the cusp of being likely blue.
What we saw in 2020, I remember there was a moment early on when the votes were being counted that it seemed like Rhode Island wasn't even going to be that blue. It seemed like Rhode Island was a toss up for a moment. I know there are a lot of working class white people in this state. I mean, it could
Well,
be
in
its
20,
proximity to Massachusetts that makes it a blue state. I'd buy that. But it does seem like there are still a lot of working class people in Rhode Island.
I was about to add into that. In 2016, there were multiple polls that showed Rhode Island within single digits.
Yeah. Yeah.
In 2024, there was one poll. The most recent poll has Biden only up by 8, but I'm not going to be too optimistic there.
Yeah.
Here's the
Neither
way I
neither
see
would
it.
I.
Here's the way I see it. I think long term wise, I think the trends in Rhode Island benefit Republicans if they invest in working class Italian voters there.
Mm.
I think those are voters that could eventually become Republican and shift the state further to the right. I know even in 2022, we saw that Alan Fung almost won one of the congressional districts there,
Oh, I remember Fung. I miss Fung.
a district that almost went Democrat 20 points just 2 years before.
Right.
So I personally have Rhode Island as D plus 15.
Right.
Now, under my model, anything between 5 and 15 is likely. Everything above 15 is safe. So
Okay.
it's up to you to call whether or not you want to make Rhode Island likely or safe, but it's going to be one of the two.
Okay. The Peter Griffins of the world are all concentrated in this area with Connecticut. How are you feeling Connecticut's going to go?
I think Connecticut will be safety. I think Trump is going to make up 3 or 4 points of margin there, but I did handicap Trump there.
Okay.
Um, Theoretically, my model would have Connecticut down to 12 points, which would make it likely D. But I do see Biden gaining support in Fairfield County, where there's a lot of rich Wall Street New Yorker suburbanites that live there.
Yeah, they can be a real
So
problem.
I think Trump is going to gain 3 points of margin in Connecticut. I think it's going to be D plus 17. In 2020, it was D plus 20. I think it's going to be D plus 17 in 2024. But I think Fairfield County is going to be the real determining factor on whether or not Connecticut shifts further to the right than we think it will.
Why do you say Fairfield County will be the determining factor?
That's where a huge chunk of the state's population is. That's where all that Fairfield County is the southwestern corner of Connecticut. A lot of people who live in Fairfield County work in New York City.
Right. Okay.
You have a
Okay.
lot of rich, wealthy, well-to-do off white voters there, and those are the type of voters that shifted away from Trump in 2020.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
So I think Trump will gain in eastern Connecticut. So Toland and Windham County, he's going to gain. He might even gain in New London County too, but I think it's only going to get him 3 points of margin. It's not going to be enough to be significant just because of how Fairfield has been voting so far.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Now, I heard that Trump was in single digits of winning New York. That he was still losing it to Biden, but that it wasn't by much. That New York was no longer a solid blue state. What's your estimation on that?
I agree that this is why I am going to say New York will be a likely Dem state.
Right.
So one step bluer than what you got it at.
Okay, right here. Hold on.
So
Right there, right there.
where Maine first district is, yeah, that's where I think it'll be. I have New York at D plus 12.
Okay.
That's that's a 9 point shift from 2020.
Okay.
Trump has cut New York City's margin in half. He's probably going to gain in upstate. The only
Hmm.
question is what happens in the suburban counties. So we know Long Island is going to shift red, but the
Mm.
problem is you have Westchester County, which is above the Bronx, between the Bronx and Connecticut. And Westchester County, like Fairfield County, Connecticut, has a lot of rich white voters who do not like Trump.
Right. Well,
So
I was gonna say.
as a result of that,
Oh,
I
sorry,
think
sorry.
New
Go
York
ahead.
is going to be 12. I think New York is going to be D plus 12. It's going to be a shift from 2020. I don't think he's going to win it.
Okay. I think that makes sense. Well, we know that Lee Zeldin, came very close to winning his race. I forget what district he was in Long Island. Um, but I think that already shows that there are certain avenues to making inroads in New York that people haven't explored previously. That it's not necessarily as blue a state as we thought it was, but that Republicans have simply been making the wrong plays. What do you think of that?
I agree.
Yep.
There's a lot of working class white voters in upstate New York,
Right.
and there's a lot of Italian American voters in Staten Island and in Brooklyn still that would shift it to the right.
Right.
So I think even among Hispanics, they're shifting to the right too. So the fact that I think there are now more Hispanics in New York City than black voters, and as a
Well, that's got
result
to
of that,
count for
because they're
something.
moving, yeah, because they're moving towards Trump at a higher rate, it's hurting their margins in New York State as a whole.
Although it could be the case that we have certain Hispanics in like, key metropolitan areas in the Northeast and in the West. Excuse me, in oh boy. Um in the West that vote Dem while in places like Nevada. Oh boy, I keep messing up. In places like Nevada, they're sort of like less clear. Like it could be that there are certain populations of Hispanics in certain metropolitan areas that are more likely to lean Dem. The Hispanic vote could be sort of divided in a way, if you know what I mean.
Hmm.
What do you think about New Jersey?
New Jersey, I think, is also going to shift to the right. It's going to be the same color shade as New York, but the margin will be closer.
Okay, okay,
New Jersey, I have New Jersey at D. I have New Jersey at D+9.
okay.
That's because Trump is going to make a lot of gains in southern New Jersey. Atlantic County, for an example, where Atlantic City is,
Right.
that was the only county on the New Jersey shore that voted Democrat. In 2021 and in the 2022 House races, Atlantic County voted Republican,
Hmm.
along with Salem County and Cumberland County, which are on the Delaware Bay in southern New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's going to be a shift in southern Jersey that makes the state closer, but not not close enough for it to be a swing state, if that makes sense.
Fair. I think that's a fair view. Um, how are you feeling about Pennsylvania, the big battleground?
I have Pennsylvania at Trump +3 at the moment.
So very light red.
Yeah, light red.
Now, to be
If
honest,
this was
go ahead.
if this video was done 2 weeks ago before that debate, I would have had Pennsylvania at tilt red. But I really think the way things are trending right now, Pennsylvania is not going to be where it was in 2016, where Trump won it by less than 1%. I think it's going to be between 1 to 3. As of right now, I'm more leaning towards the 3 point margin, but that's just where I see it. Just because he's going to gain a lot of support in Western Pennsylvania, his numbers with minorities suggest that Philly is going to trend to the right.
Hmm.
And if Philly just trended 1 point to the right from 2020, that would have been enough to make up the entire margin that Biden
Okay.
won it by 4 years ago.
Okay. Do you think the Amish will help Trump out at all?
I believe they will.
Hmm. That's good to know.
I believe they've always voted Republican, but they're voting Republican more intensely than they have in the past, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like more of them are actually turning out to vote.
Yeah. Well, you said Trump by +3 in Pennsylvania? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, so I guess that'll be the very lightest red.
Well, it'll be not the lightest. It'll be one step above that. The very lightest red is less than 1%.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay.
that right there.
Okay. Um,
After Pennsylvania, the next state would be Maryland.
yeah, how are you feeling about Maryland right now? I assume it'll be Dem leaning, but still.
Solidly blue, but I think it's going to be a shift from 2020. So I have Maryland at Democrat plus 26. But because I think Trump's numbers among minorities are going to increase, it'll shift from 32 to 26. So he'll gain, like Vermont, he'll gain 6 points of margin there.
Okay. Okay. How are you feeling about? I mean, Delaware is Biden's home state, so I assume that would also be solidly blue.
Solid, but it's going to be D plus 15. It's going to be just like Rhode Island. Solid, but on the cusp of being likely blue. If it
Okay.
wasn't Biden's home state, I would say likely, just because Trump only lost it by 11 points in 2016. If you look at the
Delaware.
margin,
Go ahead.
if you look at the margin Trump had in Delaware, he did better than most Republicans did in decades. He only lost it by 11 in
Right.
2016. Biden only won it by a lot in 2020 because that's his home state.
Right.
However, I think Biden will still win it by 15, but I think he's going to lose 5 points of margin just because of how upset people are with him. So I say Delaware is D plus 15.
Okay. I mean, even though you're Jersey, Mike, I just don't feel like Delaware is a real state, to be honest.
It kind of is a weird state because I've gone there in the past. It's geographically part of the Northeast, but there's some parts of it that are pretty southern. So
Well,
it's
I mean, I
kind
get
of a
that. I get
strange,
that about
strange
Maryland.
place.
Maryland feels like a real state. Delaware doesn't feel like a real state. It feels like it shouldn't even exist. Is
Well, it
that
only
crazy?
exists because it was. Well, it only exists because it's the first state that ratified the Constitution. So Delaware is not only a real state; it calls itself the first state.
Yeah, I know, right? It's ridiculous. It feels like it shouldn't be like a real place. I don't know.
It used to be part of Pennsylvania, and then it split off in like the early 1700s. Pennsylvania used to have a coastline, and then Delaware split off from it.
Yeah. That doesn't feel right to me. I feel like it should be like made part of Maryland, to be honest. Um, Now Virginia. There's an important state. What are your feelings on
Well,
Virginia?
I hate to cut you off, but we just have to mark DC as solid blue right now because
Wait.
DC does get three electoral votes, and that's between Virginia and Maryland.
Okay, right there. There we go.
Now, I do have DC shifting to the right, but it's still going to be a extremely blue district.
Well, DC is a very heavily black city, so that's to be expected, unfortunately.
Yeah,
Um,
but if Trump gets 20% of the black vote, you could see him gaining some ground there.
I would hope that Trump is able to make some sort of inroads into the black community and that black America is finally tired of the awful, abysmal leadership that Democrats have been giving. But we'll see how the social consequences of this election actually turn out. How about Virginia, in your estimation?
All right, when it comes to Virginia right now, I have Virginia pretty competitive just because Youngkin won it and things are not the same as they were in 2020, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
So right now, I have Virginia as Biden plus two,
Okay.
so an 8 point shift towards Trump. So Trump, I think, is it's possible Trump could flip Virginia if Trump picks Glenn Youngkin. I think the state would flip as his vice president.
Hmm.
But I'm only saying it's going to be narrowly blue just because of what the region that's called Nova, if that makes sense. Northern Virginia.
Northern Virginia, you're saying?
So, yeah, every night on election night, the Republican will lead in Virginia until 90% of the vote comes in. And then the last 10% of the vote always comes from Fairfax County, and that usually is what puts the Democrat over the top.
Okay, that makes sense.
Now, this is still good news for Trump because Trump lost Virginia by 10 4 years ago.
Okay.
So only losing by two is still a good shift. It's just, I mean, it's not impossible, but with Northern Virginia and all those DC suburbs, I'm not ready to make it flip yet, if that makes sense.
That's fair. That's fair. Um,
Next, North Carolina.
sure, North Carolina. How are you feeling about North Carolina?
I think it's going to be Trump plus 6, so likely are.
Okay. Oh, hold on.
And the reason why I'm saying, well, that yeah, likely are. The reason why I'm saying this, well, one step above that, yeah, there.
There we are.
One step below that,
There we are.
yeah, there we are. The reason why I'm saying this is because remember, North Carolina still voted for Mitt Romney despite how shit of a candidate he was in 2012.
That's true.
It went R plus 4 in 2016. If it only had gone 1.5 points more to the right, it would have been a likely state.
Mm-hmm.
And in 2020, despite everything they threw at Trump, Trump still won it.
Right.
So I think with all the shifts going on, I think North Carolina will probably vote for Trump by above 5 points, but under 8 points. So I'm saying R plus 6 is a safe bet for it right now.
I've also heard that in North and South Carolina, the black counties that exist, I think in the interior of each state, are generally speaking more right leaning than other black counties throughout the rest of the US. So I find this
That
very plausible.
that is correct because a lot of those black voters in those areas are more socially conservative than in other areas.
Right.
So as a result of that, there are going to be some blacks that are going to vote on their social values and not based on like, oh, the Democrats say based on what they're told on how to vote, if that makes sense.
That's fantastic. And we should really, if there is a sort of black conservatism to be built in the United States, it should come out of the Carolinas. I assume, will South Carolina be the similar color in your estimation?
South Carolina is going to be solid red. I
Solid
have
red?
South Carolina voting for Trump by 19 points.
Okay.
Just because the demographics are slightly different, it's a little bit less diverse, and it's a lot more. It's a little bit more socially conservative.
Okay.
There's a
Now,
lot more rural whites. There's a lot. North Carolina has more suburban whites than South Carolina does, so that's why I have South Carolina as solid red.
that makes sense. Well, I was going to say, drifting north really quickly, how do you feel about West Virginia?
West Virginia is going to be one of the reddest states in the country. I have it voting for
Obviously.
Trump by about 47 points.
Absolutely decimated by the opioid crisis.
And remember, this was a state that Al Gore almost won in 2000.
Really?
Just 24 years ago in our lifetime, yeah, George W. Bush only won West Virginia by 5 points in 2000.
Wow.
A lot of people think if Al Gore did more campaigning in West Virginia and he won it, electorally, Florida would not have mattered.
Hmm.
I mean, West Virginia voted for Michael Dukakis over George H.W. Bush in his 1988 landslide. It
Well,
voted for Jimmy Carter over Ronald Reagan.
I hold on. I've heard of this. Hold on. What do you call it? No, 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 no. Hold on. Here we are. Yeah. So, I've heard, and what I've heard to back up that explanation is that there's a certain regions of Appalachia that were kind of what I've heard to back up that explanation is that there are certain regions of Appalachia that could have kind of gone either way. There's like a sort of even though people in the North would now consider them Southerners, there's a group of people who live in this area of Appalachia who have sometimes sided with the South, but then have also sometimes sided with the North, because I believe in the Civil War, West Virginia was actually a northern state, siding with the
It
North,
was.
and Virginia was a
And
southern
actually,
state.
that's why it split off of Virginia.
Exactly, exactly. Um, so That and I think that would also explain West Virginia's support of those Democratic slash liberal candidates that feels only very recently, but then also the stereotype of West Virginia as being super red. It sort
Well,
of that fact sort of explains how it can really be both at the same time, if you know what I mean.
well, I think the thing that's going to explain it the most is the fact that West Virginia used to have a lot of unionized coal labor there.
Of course, of course.
Democrats turned their back on working class whites.
The Union Dem
Back
vote.
dur- yeah, back during the New Deal and like the Great Society with Lyndon Johnson and stuff like that, West Virginia used to vote blue because they used to do whatever the unions told them to do.
Of course.
Nowadays, with the whole climate change policies and stuff like that, West Virginia can't vote Democrat because it would destroy their livelihoods.
Well, they're under direct attack from it.
Yep.
So I'm thinking, let's go Ohio, Kentucky, Tennessee, Georgia. What do you think? How are you feeling about
That
Ohio?
would I think Ohio's shift is going to continue to the right. I currently have Ohio voting Trump plus 13, so it would be a likely R state. Yep, right there. And I only say this because Trump has gained, or Republicans have gained more ground in Ohio even after 2020. For an example, J.D. Vance won Mahoning County, the county where the city of Youngstown is.
Okay.
Youngstown is a city area that voted, Mahoning County voted for Obama by 30 points in 2012.
Mm-hmm.
So even like as recently as 2012, that area of Ohio was solidly blue.
Oh wow.
After 2020, that changed, and that shift has still continued up to this day. There are some polls that have Trump ahead between 15 to 17 points in Ohio. I don't. I'm not going to be that optimistic, but I do. I could easily see him winning it from 12 to 13 points.
Can you believe that Ohio was a blue state back in 2008?
I can just because of one, how bad of a candidate John McCain was.
He was terrible. He was terrible.
I mean, McCain almost lost Montana. He only won Montana by 3 points.
Ooh, that hurts. That hurts.
McCain almost lost Missouri. Missouri was less than a percentage point for McCain.
Wow. Yeah,
And he
that's rough.
lost North Carolina. He lost Indiana.
Right here.
Yep, look, Indiana went blue.
Ugh. That feels like it should never happen ever. That's really
Well,
bad.
when you send a lot of American soldiers off to die in the Middle East, you crash the economy, and you tell the American voters that your solution is you're going to stay in Iraq for the next 100 years if you have to. That's kind of what happens.
I guess it is. Look at that. Oh, that's this map feels so cursed. I can't even look at it anymore. Oh, please tell me about Kentucky.
All right, Kentucky's going to be solid red.
Okay.
Trump will gain more ground there. It'll go from 26 to 32 points for Trump, so Trump will gain 6 points there. So there's
Okay.
going to be more former coal and like union voters that'll shift to Trump. There's really no part of Kentucky that's trending blue. The only reason why Democrats won a governor race there is because their governor is basically a Republican on issues. They have a
Okay.
Democratic governor who technically is socially conservative and basically signs off on like 80% of what his Republican legislature puts in front of him.
Let's say, where's Joe Manchin from? Joe Manchin's a
West
senator.
Virginia.
Yeah, Joe Manchin's a
Yeah, he's
senator.
from West Virginia.
Yeah, that's what I thought. But he the guy who's the governor of Kentucky is basically like a Joe Manchin.
Basically.
Okay. Yeah.
And the funny thing is, the guy from Kentucky, the governor of Kentucky, actually recently said that he'd be willing to replace Joe Biden as a Democrat nominee.
Mm.
And even the progressive YouTube channel, The Young Turks, their host, Cenk Uygur, said that he would take a conservative Democrat over Joe Biden just because he wants to win.
Oh, I hate the Young
Like
Turks.
he said, I know, but it's just kind of like crazy because Cenk actually ran for president a few months ago. He was in the Democratic primary,
Mm.
and
What a st-
he gave up some of his progressive platform. Like he said, instead of being for Medicare for all, he was for a public option
Mhm.
and some other stuff that he would never have said 6 years ago.
Of course. How are you feeling about Tennessee?
Tennessee's going to shift further to the right. It's already solidly red state. It's going to go from 24 points to about 30 points.
Mm.
I think Republicans are going to make more gains out of Nashville. The Democrats lost their last seat in Central Tennessee just 2 years ago,
Mm.
and I mean, even like the reddest, even like the only area the Democrats have in Tennessee is Memphis.
Hmm.
And even if they still win Memphis, which they probably will, black voters are still moving to the right. So I don't see them doing any. I see them doing worse in Tennessee than they did 4 years ago.
Okay. Okay. Now here's a controversial one. How about Georgia? How are you seeing Georgia?
I see Georgia going reverting back to what it was in 2016, so R+5, so lean Republican.
Right about there?
One more there. Yep.
Okay.
So here's the deal: Biden has already lost a lot of support among black voters, as we kept talking about.
Mhm.
And based on what we've seen in the polls, he's also lost ground among white voters.
Mm.
So, along with this, like southern Georgia, it's going to shift heavily to the right. So, anything below Atlanta, so around the Savannah area and like below Atlanta, is going to shift to the right. And even the areas around Atlanta, like the inner city, if Trump is at 20% of the black vote or even just 15%, that also shifts right.
Of course. Of course.
Uh, I see Georgia going back to where it was in 2016, R+5.
Okay. Okay.
Most polls have Trump up by 6 or 7. I'm just being a little bit conservative with my estimate.
Okay. How do you feel Florida's gonna head?
Florida's been on a heavy trend to the right so far.
Are you saying solid
I
red?
see, I'll say likely red. I see Florida going to R+11.
Okay.
So still under 15 points, but still, that's still an 8 point shift from where it was in 2020. I mean, I
I've
don't
heard
see
even in the
Trump
major
winning.
cities, even in Miami, everyone's voting Republican. So,
Yeah, I think Miami-Dade County is going to flip. Trump only lost it by 6 points 4 years ago.
mhm.
But I do think it's not going to be as big of a victory as 2022 was, if that makes sense. Just because there's going to be higher Dem turnout than there was 4 years ago.
Why do you say higher Dem turnout there?
Just because Dems tend to lag during midterm elections in states like Florida.
Okay.
Dems are better at showing up when there's a presidential ticket, if that makes sense.
Okay. That does make sense.
So I
Uh,
don't think Trump's going to win Florida by 20, but I could still see him winning it by 11 or 12 points.
how you feeling about Alabama?
That's going to be solid red.
Okay.
Trump will probably win Alabama by 30 points. I see it going 65 to 35. He's going
Okay.
to make, as I said, he's going to make some gains with black voters, and I just don't see Biden making any gains with Southern whites at this point in that area.
Absolutely not. How about Mississippi?
Mississippi is also going to be solid red. I see Trump winning Mississippi by a little bit less than Alabama just because Mississippi has more of a black population than Alabama does. I see Trump winning by 22.
Of
That's
course.
still a solid margin.
How about Indiana? Let's go north. Indiana.
When it comes to Indiana, I think Trump is going to win it by a solid margin. I think it'll be about around 25 points.
Okay.
I think
Reassuring.
with his gains among minorities and as we saw rural whites and white voters continuing to shift to the right, I just don't see Biden making up any ground there.
Now here's a controversial choice. Michigan. How are you feeling about that?
When it comes to the state of Michigan, I think Trump will win Michigan by 2 percentage points. So lean R.
Okay.
Just because Biden has already pissed off a lot of Arab voters,
Of
and
course.
there, I've seen interviews by liberals. This is not a conservative news source. This is liberal news source, and there are literally Arab voters in Michigan that are saying, "Don't care if our votes cost or give Trump the election. We're not voting for Biden."
Wow. What is it? Dearborn that has all the Somalis?
Yep. Well, they have Arabs, not Somalis. They're two different pop. They're both Muslims, but different ethnicities, if that
Okay.
makes sense.
My mistake. I thought only Minnesota had Somalis, but Dearborn has Arabs. Okay.
Yeah.
How are you feeling about Illinois right now?
Illinois is actually going to shift to the right. I see Illinois as being a likely D margin Democrat plus 11.
Okay.
And I'm saying this because back in 2022, Republicans nominated somebody who was considered, well, one step bluer than that. So same color as New York.
There we are.
Republicans nominated a guy who was considered to be like the Doug Mastriano of Illinois. Like he literally went to like pro Palestine rallies.
Oh,
But he ended up winning. He ended up doing better in Illinois than Bruce Rauner, the incumbent governor who lost 4 years previously.
okay.
Uh, we only lost Illinois by 12 points in 2022. And that's when the media branded the Republican candidate as extreme and out of touch.
Okay.
So I see Trump narrowing it down to about 11 points.
Okay. Okay. Well, and
Biggest thing about Illinois,
there's also Chicago too, and I feel like that's kind of impenetrable, you know.
yeah. But the thing that people fail to realize is there's a lot of blacks that are moving out of the Midwest. So as a result of Illinois losing some of their black population, it's moving to the right because that area is becoming somewhat less blue.
Well, that's true. They're moving from Illinois to Georgia. That's my understanding.
Yeah. So I'd say give Illinois another 25 years and it might be a swing state.
Yeah, that's promising. That's promising. Although Georgia, of course, will suffer. Um,
Yep.
how are you feeling about Wisconsin right now?
Wisconsin, I think, is going to be the best out of Trump's Rust Belt states just because it leans the most Republican. And even in 2022, we still won it.
Right.
So I have Wisconsin at Trump plus 3.5. So lean
Okay.
Republican.
Okay. Why do you
Just
say that?
because just because Trump has a strong base in the driftless region. If you look at the Mississippi River border by Iowa, there's a lot of counties there that tend to vote Democrat in every other election, but they always show up for Trump when he's on the ballot. He's got a strong base of support there. And I think some of the areas around Milwaukee are not happy with how crime is going up, and they might blame liberal policies based on the results of that.
Okay. I hope you're right. I hope you're right. I feel like it's a little optimistic, but I could see it going. Given how abysmal Biden's performance has been in the last debate, I definitely think it could go this way. So
And remember, I'm handicapping Biden. Like my original model would have Trump up by a lot more than what he's currently up. So I'm giving Biden the benefit of the doubt that he overperforms the polls.
You're giving him credit.
Yeah, I'm giving Biden more credit than the polls do.
How are you feeling about Minnesota?
I think Minnesota is going to be. I think it's a sleeper flip.
Okay. What is that? What do you mean by that?
So it's a state that not a lot of people are talking about that Trump is polling very well in at the moment.
Okay.
I currently have Minnesota. I mean, you're going to make the final call because I have it dead even. I have it at a tie. Now,
Okay.
obviously, we have to decide who do you think is going to win it ever so slightly.
I'm inclined to say the Dems.
All right, but
Just because
I
they've
think
historically won it. I don't think we can break even. I think there's too many suburban white voters who will lean Biden, but I appreciate your
but
optimism.
the only counterbalance I'm going to give you is St. Louis County,
Okay. Okay.
Minnesota. You zoom in, you see where Lake Superior touches the land over there.
Yeah.
That's where the city of Duluth is.
Okay.
Duluth is a former working class steel town, and a lot of areas in northern Minnesota have a decent amount of population that used to vote Democrat but are now trending more to the right than they have been ever before. So
Okay.
I think I think if Trump breaks even in St. Louis County, he's probably already won the Rust Belt, and Minnesota would be a nail biter if that makes sense.
Yeah.
'Cause this
Yeah.
was an area that voted for like Obama by 25 points.
Yeah. Um, how you feeling about Iowa? Solid red?
I have Iowa as R plus 16.
Okay.
I just think Iowa has just been trending Republican in every election. Even Trump vastly overperformed the polls there in 2020. And in 2022, it was still very solidly R. So I just don't see Iowa ever being a swing state ever again.
Me too. How about Missouri? Of
Solid R.
course.
I think Trump's going to gain a few points there from 2020, but it was already at a solid margin 4 years ago. So I don't think there's too much to say there, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I say the same thing with Arkansas. Arkansas is already a solid red state. Trump
And
might gain some
Louisiana?
points there. Yeah, and Louisiana. Trump may gain some points there because black voters are shifting to the right. But it's just they're just solid Republican Southern states. I just don't see much to say there just because of that.
Yeah, I agree. North Dakota, solid R.
Yep. Same with South Dakota as well.
Okay, now Nebraska. I see they're like Maine. They have these different districts. How are you feeling for each of those in Nebraska?
All right. So Nebraska District 1, which is not the blue one, that's the one around the blue one, if that
Okay.
makes sense.
The larger one.
Yes, that one.
Mm-hmm.
Solid red. Nebraska 3, which is the biggest one, solid red.
Oh, okay.
And then Nebraska 2, which is where Omaha is,
That's
I
the big
say
city.
tilty. Yeah, I'll
You said
put it where Minnesota tilty.
yeah.
I'm only saying that because the boundaries were redrawn that makes it slightly more Republican than it was in 2020. The boundaries were redrawn that gave the Republicans an extra 3 points of margin there, and we've
We
held that
love
congressional.
gerrymandering in our favor.
Yep, and we've held that congressional seat in
Right.
Congress. The person that represents that is a Republican. So, I mean, it's not impossible that Trump wins it, but I'm just saying, just narrow D for now.
Okay. Okay. Solid red for Kansas.
Yeah, Kansas will shift to the right. I think black voters in the Kansas City area will shift slightly to the right, and I don't see any white voters in rural Kansas shifting towards Biden.
How about Oklahoma? Solid red. You there?
Yeah, they have no. They. I'm just going to sum it up here. They have no counties.
Yeah. I mean, Oklahoma is the reddest state in the entire country, so
Yeah, one of the reddest. They have no counties there.
literally none.
Texas, I would put Texas in the same category as Ohio, likely are.
Okay.
I think Trump will gain 6 points of margin there, so it'll be R plus 12 or R plus 13. So between the Rio Grande Valley plus Fort Worth flipping back to the Republicans, I see Trump gaining 6 points there, and
Awesome.
the trend that Hispanics are on. I think the Democrats' dream of a Blexit is not going to happen.
Yeah. Certainly not.
Mhm.
Can you go into more about the Democrats' dream?
So yeah, so for the last 20 years, the Democrats believed more Hispanic immigration would make Texas a blue state.
Right.
And at one point, Republicans were worried they may be right because Ted Cruz narrowly won Texas against Beto O'Rourke back in 2018.
Right.
However, what really happened was a lot of Hispanic voters are not blindly loyal to the Democrats. A
Right.
lot of them are here to make money. They're not
Right.
here to be pawns for the Democratic Party. And when they're not making money, they're not going to vote the same way they've been voting, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah.
Along with that, the Democrats have actually alienated themselves from a lot of Hispanics. For example, liberal white people tried to push the whole Latinx movement,
Right.
where instead of saying Latina or Latino, they would say Latinx. And that pissed a lot of Hispanics off
Right.
because a lot of Hispanics are fairly socially conservative Catholic voters, and they're not really a fan of the whole transgender inclusivity stuff.
Of course not.
So those two factors alone ended up backfiring on the Democrats, and that's why Texas is not only stabilized, but will probably move further to the right than it was in 2020.
Not to mention, there are many Hispanic voters that also occupy, especially in Texas, that also occupy the same industries that former Union Dem whites did. So I
Yeah,
think that's another reason. Yeah, that's another reason they could shift rightward.
like some of these counties that are heavily Republican in North Texas have a lot of Hispanics in them, and they still vote like 88% Republican.
Mm,
So I think the dreams of a Blexis is not happening.
mm. All right. Now, how are you feeling about Montana,
Solid red,
Wyoming,
solid red.
Colorado?
Now, Colorado is a state that Biden won by quite a bit in 2020.
All
I
those
think it's
potheads in
going to,
Denver?
yep. But because Hispanics are trending red, I think Colorado will trend to the right. But I think it's going to be likely Dem, not lean Dem, just because there's a lot of potheads in Denver and there's a lot of anti Trump suburban Republicans around Denver.
Mm, mm.
So it'll be, instead of it being D plus 13, it'll be D plus 6.
Makes sense.
Now,
How
when
you?
it comes to New Mexico,
Yeah. How does this say? How you
I,
feeling about New Mexico?
I think it's going to be more to the right than Colorado is. I think it's going to be lean Democrat. It'll be D plus 4, just because of the shifts we're seeing with Hispanics all over the country.
Of course. Of course.
Now, I think Santa Fe and Albuquerque will still keep it blue, but I think it's going to be significantly less blue than it was 4 years ago.
Makes sense. How you feel about
Now, I think
Idaho? Oh, go. Sorry. Go
solid
ahead.
red.
Oh,
Idaho is going to be solid red. There's not much to say there.
you had something to say about New Mexico first, though. I cut you off.
Oh, I just said that I think Santa Fe and Albuquerque are going to be the only things that keep it blue.
Okay. Makes sense. Makes sense. Especially because so much of the state is empty as well. And they have
Yep.
they have like Indian reservations here in the north, I think.
Yeah, the Indians will vote Democrat, and the Hispanics will trend right, but it won't be enough to offset Albuquerque and Santa Fe.
True. True. All right, how you feeling about Utah?
Solid red.
Of course.
Even though Mormons have been problematic, it's just Trump is not going to do any worse. Trump still won it by over 20 points in 2020. He's just not going to do worse there.
Well, the thing with Mormons is they're just such normie Republicans. Like they're solid
They're like the big
they're solidly are, but they're not populists, if you know what I mean.
they're more neocons if that makes sense.
Of course. Of course. Got any opinions on Arizona?
I'd say I'm gonna give Biden the benefit of the doubt and just say it's gonna be lean R and not likely R. I think Trump will win it by like 3 to 4 points. Well, it's
Okay.
gonna be red, just not as red as some other people say it will be.
There we are.
I think Arizona will probably go back to where it was in 2016, Trump +4.
Why are you saying that?
Just, just because as we talked in other states, Hispanics are shifting a lot further to the right, and white voters aren't really happy with what's going on. Trump is probably going to pick up some votes in Maricopa County that will be enough to flip the state.
How you feeling about Nevada?
Nevada, I actually have Nevada going redder than Arizona because the trends there are even better for us.
That's good. Well, I've heard
So
there are
Nevada,
some Hispanics in and around what is it? The Phoenix area. I mean not Phoenix,
well, Las
Arizona.
Vegas,
Excuse me.
Las
Yeah,
Vegas.
exactly. The Las Vegas area that are trending rightward.
That, remember, Trump also just made a promise to not tax their tips either,
Ooh, there we go.
which
That's
he was
right. That's
leading
right.
into a
I knew that
local.
was going to come in handy. I thought that was such an when the moment I heard that Trump was like, "Oh, I'm not going to tax tips anymore." I thought that was a very unorthodox position to take. I knew it would be favorable to him and that he was taking it for good reason, but I was like,
And
that's
he
very
announced that,
unconventional."
and he announced it in Las Vegas.
Oh. Oh, he did.
Yes, he did.
He knew what he was doing. Cuz I know they have some sort of chefs union or like cooks union there.
Yep, because of all the casinos and all that.
Oh, that's a smart move. That's a very smart move.
So that's why I think Nevada will probably go red by like 6 points.
Okay. Okay. How do you feel about the left coast? How do you feel about Washington?
Now, the left coast, Washington, believe it or not, Washington Trump is polling very similarly in Washington than he's polled in New York.
Hmm.
All the last three polls only have Trump up by 8 points in Washington. So
Hmm.
I say Washington will probably be D+13. I'm going to give Biden an extra 5 points of margin just to be generous to him, but I think it's going to be closer than it was in 2020.
Hmm. Okay. Okay.
Oregon, I think Oregon's going to vote slightly to the right of Washington. I have Oregon as D+10. So likely Dem, but still better showing than 2020.
Okay. Okay.
California is going to be solid Dem. It's going to be D+22. But
Okay.
keep in mind, Biden won the state by 29 points 4 years ago with Trump's gains among Hispanics and other
Well, so
minority
it's
groups. I
still
think
not going to be as
California.
solid of a win as one would expect from California.
Yeah. No, like Trump's going to pull in the high 30s and maybe even low 40s on a bad day for Biden.
Okay.
Remember, I'd like to point out in 2022, even though 2022 was a bad year for us, The Republican candidate still got 42% in the California governor race against Gavin Newsom, which is impressive.
Hmm.
Now
Well,
that just leaves us with
I'm
what?
sorry. Go ahead. Go. Let's finish up the last two states, and we'll talk about some other stuff. Go ahead. Let's go with
Right.
Hawaii.
That's a lot. All right, Hawaii's going to be solid D, but it's going to trend further to the right because Biden is taking a hit there due to how he handled the tsunami incident last year.
Hmm. That's an important fact to
So
remember.
I think it goes from D plus 29 to D plus 21. So
All right. So even the Democrats think Donald Trump is going to beat Joe Biden. The leaked memo
I,
reveals a comfortable victory for the former president with a 33 to 205 victory in the Electoral College, with Trump taking most swing states along with Republican strongholds on his projected path to victory. These include previously Democratic leaning states such as New Hampshire, Virginia, and New Mexico, while Trump reportedly leads the president by 7 points in the crucial states of Pennsylvania and Michigan. Now, how are you feeling about this map? Do you feel like it's mostly accurate?
I mean, I think my map is more accurate than that, just because I think they're overestimating Trump in some of the battleground states, and I just don't see Virginia voting to the right of Maine.
Right.
Maine voted to the right of Virginia as far back as 2016.
Okay. Fair. And especially
So,
not New Hampshire
I,
voting to the right of Maine.
yeah, no, just because Maine's got a higher white working class population than both of those states.
Yeah, and you have all the that influx into New Hampshire of sort of
Boston.
of Bostonians.
Hmm.
That makes a lot of sense to me.
Hmm.
Anything else about this map you find unrealistic?
I think Colorado is closer than it will be.
Okay. Fair.
I just think the potheads in Denver are not. It's going to be a lot. It's. I think it's undersampling what the Denver vote's going to be,
They'll be too stoned to turn out.
or too stoned to vote the right way.
Yeah. I mean, at least after the debate, I'm relieved. I'm the type of man to never count his eggs before they're hatched, but I do find what we've seen very promising. I mean, obviously,
Hmm.
people are going to vote the way they're going to vote, and trends can't really be bucked, and a lot of these states are going to continue in the way that they're going to continue. But it really does seem to me, on an individual level at least, that people simply cannot justify voting for Biden because he's just so obviously senile. Hold on. I think there was
Hmm.
a specific article about this.
I mean, just look at that debate. At one point, couldn't even understand what he was saying.
Well, yeah, he was literally senile. I remember there's some sort of crazy headline from the Atlantic about whether or not we even need a president in the first place. Oh, here we go. It's from C-SPAN. I think this is this year. Do we really? Wait, no, no, it's not. Never mind. There was some sort of crazy headline that I saw recently. Um,
Well, the Atlantic wrote a headline 7 years ago claiming that the rest of the world should vote in the U.S. presidential election
that is so insane.
because they were trying to argue, oh, well, we have such an outsized say in what happens globally, so the rest of the world has a stake in how we vote.
That's just mask off globalism.
It is.
That's really disturbing.
But people like this are who are the same people who are pushing Biden right now.
That is un I even kind of I vaguely remember the article you're talking about, and it's just not brought up enough. There's just so many different instances, little dribs and drabs of these globalist, liberal, coastal elites advocating for complete lunacy. and the utter
Hmm.
destruction of the American people. It's truly disturbing.
Hmm.
I
It's
mean,
true.
thankfully, it seems that we're set up to win now. Knock on wood, crossing our fingers here. Um, so hopefully all goes well. And you have any last thoughts, Mikey? Jersey Mike?
I think Trump's headed for a victory right now. I think there are still some things that could help him. I mean, the last thing I will point out is there's a possibility of the October surprise of Ukraine collapsing this fall due to in the war with Russia.
That's right.
Which, if that were to happen, that would definitely turn the tide against Biden because Biden spent the good time of his presidency convincing people to throw more money into this effort.
That's right.
So I think Biden may get a small bump within the next month, but I don't think it's going to be enough to overcome what's happening. Like the Democrats have to win the popular vote by 4 points nationally just to narrowly win the electoral college.
That's right.
He would
I
have
mean,
to make up 11 points between now and November, and I just don't see it happening.
well, at this rate, are we winning the national? Are we winning the popular vote nationally?
Yes, we're winning by 3 points at this moment.
Yeah, and that would be a complete repudiation of every democratic slash leftist narrative that the right can never win the popular vote. This would be devastating.
It should be, but the thing is, the media has been playing so much cover for Biden. They just don't want to admit the reality of how bad he's doing. I mean,
I
some are. CNN is starting to realize, wait a minute, maybe what we've been saying this entire time is a lie.
Yeah, I've seen CNN turn on him.
But he's already lost CNN, so the question is, and they and the last thing I will say is a lot of people will claim that they're going to try to flip him out or switch him out. I don't see that happening because the deadline to be on the ballot is already passed in multiple states.
That's true. That's true. Although I will mention there have been some, I don't think it will be with some sort of other candidate, but there have been some significant rumblings from donors that they want to have Kamala replace him. I mean, I think of all the people who could replace Biden, Kamala is the most plausible one. I don't know how
And
likely
she
this
would
is,
lose
but
by an even bigger margin than Biden's losing by
you said she would lose by a
because
bigger margin. Well, yeah, that's the thing. She's even
because
less popular.
she's even less popular. Yeah.
Well, that's the other reason why is um before I was discussing all these different reasons as to why like for one, switching out at this point is already going to be confusing to a lot of people because most people have made their minds up by June or July as to who they're voting for. So then
Yeah,
switching out
and in
one
some
of the candidates is just going to be more confusing. And then like
and in some states that deadline's already passed. That ship's already sailed.
exactly. So So whoever steps up to the plate, at first, if it had been before all this happened, and Biden said he wasn't going to run for reelection again, then it would have been more plausible that there would have been a fight. But now, whoever steps up in Biden's place is almost guaranteed to lose. Because not only do you
Yep.
have the disfavorable polling, you also have the fact that now it's kind of a last minute switcheroo. And that's obviously going to act against their interest. So the only person I think, because not even Gavin Newsom seems interested in replacing Biden, in my opinion. It's basically a
Mhm.
guaranteed loss. And Gavin Newsom wants to be president. But if you have a guaranteed loss under your belt, you've already been repudiated by the American people once. So Gavin Newsom's not going to want this spot. And I guess whoever they choose
He's
would be a
waiting for
sort of sacrificial
2028.
cat. What was that?
Newsom's waiting for 2028.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
And then the final thing I'd like to say is in like this is pretty much like good for our side. the liberal YouTube channel, The Young Turks, led by Cenk Uygur, who is supposedly one of the most progressive, well, claims to be the most progressive YouTube channel. But I know you've already done an expose on how him and Hassan have already been trending towards the center now.
Of course.
But he is saying that Biden is definitely toast,
Hmm.
and that not only will Trump win all the swing states, but anything close to a swing state will be lost, and that if things continue the way they're going, he thinks RFK will outtake Biden in the popular vote.
Oh, oh, that's really rough to hear. I
Now,
don't. I wouldn't go so far. I would.
I don't believe. I think Biden is still going to get 40% of the vote no matter what.
Yeah, me too.
But but if you got somebody who's usually the biggest cheerleader for the Democratic Party saying that about your chances, I mean, you know it's bad.
Oh, definitely, definitely. Anyway, that's it for this video. Thanks for being here, Jersey Mike, and giving us your prediction. And I'm sure we'll have more in the coming months as things continue. Of course, models have broken down with the Biden's catastrophic defeat during the debate, but this is a little bit of an informed opinion as to how things may turn out in November. So, thank you, and Red Channels will catch you in the next one.